Good morning, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, without further ado, let's get into the news this Wednesday morning. And it looks like Katie Hobbs and the Maricopa County Supervisor elections are going to go ahead and sue Kari Lake and her team after the judge ruled against Kari Lake and her team, working to expose the corruption in Arizona's elections and how everything took place and everything. While this stuff was revealed to the American public, even though the mainstream media refused to cover it, there was a lot that was revealed, a lot that we see that, of course, State of Secretary of State Katie Hobbs decided to turn a blind eye to all of the illegal processes that were taking place where they weren't matching signatures, they were allowing things to come in that weren't part of the election, the failures of tabulators, the failures of the county machines, the failures of Maricopa County, and I say failures, I think it was absolutely set up to fail in that way. And so, of course, everyone saw this coming, that Katie Hobbs' team was going to sue Kari Lake after her lawsuit failed against Katie Hobbs. And this is how it worked out. They're going to try to sanction these lawyers, Kari Lake's team, Kari like yourself, because they don't want to be challenged. Democrats across the country are working right now in order to shore up their election grabs in these indie states. So that way, it will be a one-party rule from here on out. There won't be any ability to have a Republican legislator, a Republican governor, a Republican Secretary of State, etc., etc. Because they're going to start the game even more against people like Kari Lake and others. If you're not part of the unit party, you will not be allowed to ascend to these positions, they will not allow you to win. And that is the point of these lawsuits that Kari Lake's bringing, saying, hey, look, they colluded together to ensure that I cannot win. That's what they did. They ensured that they knew there was going to be a big flux of voters coming on election day, and they ensured that there was going to be machine failures. There were going to be things that would prevent them causing voter disenfranchising voters, voter suppression. They were going to use all these tactics, and they did. And so we have this article coming to us from the Gateway Pundit laying out what Katie Hobbs plans on doing. So let's go and take a look what we have here. It says Maricopa County and Katie Hobbs seek more than $500,000 for Hillary attorney Mark Ellis. And sanctions for Kari Lake and her lawyers. That's right. Katie Hobbs and the Maricopa County have filed motions for sanctions and applications for attorney's fees against Kari Lake and her attorneys following Lake's lawsuit contesting the 2022 midterm election. According to court records, Katie Hobbs is asking for more than $500,000, mostly for corrupt Hillary attorney Mark Ellis's firm. The Gateway Pundit reported gutless Judge Peter Thompson dismissed Kari Lake's election lawsuit against Democrat Katie Hobbs in the 2022 midterm election on Saturday, Christmas Eve. As Rachel Alexander from Town Hall reported, Judge Peter Thompson only gave her 2 days for a trial and issued his ruling immediately afterwards, even though he could have taken several days, and it was one of the biggest and most important cases in the country. Legal experts believed his decision was ghostwritten. They suspect top left-wing attorneys like Mark Ellis emailed him what to say. The Gateway Pundit has reportedly reported extensively on Kari Lake's lawsuit to overturn the corrupt midterm election. On election day in Maricopa County, over 50% of the tabulators and printers failed the moment that polls opened, causing voters to be turned away from polls, creating long wait times, 4 hours or more. This was clear intentional act aimed at disenfranchising Republican voters who turned out 3-1 for Trump's endorsed candidates. Corrupt Maricopa County Director Scott Jarrett was also busted changing his story and perjuring himself by lying about the ballot printing settings and causing tabulator failures and disenfranchising thousands of election date voters. A run-buck run-back whistleblower revealed in Legs filing that hundreds of thousands of ballots had no chain of custody documentation. This is a shocking and massive violation of law. 25,000 ballots were added to Maricopa County's totals after Election Day with no explanation of why the number of remaining ballots could increase, also tens if not hundreds of 1,000, since a mail-in ballots with mismatched signatures were illegally counted and are a violation of Arizona law. However, despite all of the evidence, it remains to be a reasonable compromise. Elections and international misconduct by elections officials. Maricopa County's motions for sanction states this matter was brought without any legitimate justification. Further, they accused Kari Lake of using the courts to fundraise and harass her opponents. The county's motion concludes that courts are established by Arizona's constitution and statutes to resolve actual disputes between parties. They do not exist so that candidates a political office can attempt to make political statements and fundraise, and they should not be used to harass political opponents and show complete unfounded doubts about the integrity of elections. And all of those things happen in this matter. Enough really is enough as the past to end to unfold with unfounded attacks on elections and unwarranted accusations against election officials. This matter was brought without any legitimate justification, let alone a substantial one. The Maricopa County defendants therefore asked the court to impose sanctions against plaintiff Kari Lake and her attorneys, Brian Bellum and Kurt Olson. Yeah. So there you have it, they're going to try to silence Kari Lake even further, along with her lawyers. And this is again another way that they do this to scare lawyers from wanting to represent people like Kari Lake and others who will have actual election problems, and they're going to ensure that they won't want anybody to represent them. So again, this is what Democrats do, the globalists, that unit party. They don't want outsiders to get in and ruin their gravy train. And then, in Arizona, as I'm sure you all know by now, the judge presiding over the Kari Lake election lawsuit threw out her case on Christmas Eve, putting on what was nothing less than a show trial, a sham trial that looked fair, but in the end was nothing more than kabuki theater. I think the Gateway Pundit put it best. They had the headline, "Judge Peter Thompson rules, elections with broken machines and 60% of precincts and no chain of custody for ballots are free, fair, and certifiable." Well, they're certainly certifiably insane. Again, as many of you know, Kari Lake's team showed first, Maricopa County officials broke chain of custody procedures, rendering hundreds of thousands of ballots as invalid. And secondly, Maricopa County officials misprinted Election Day ballots, causing mass delays on Election Day, which experts and legal witnesses testified cost Kari Lake the election. There's no way that anyone watching those proceedings could have come away with any other conclusion. Katie Hobbs' legal team was an absolute embarrassment. They didn't even deny any of that happened. They just claimed, well, it didn't matter. It gets it back. Kari Lake's team got Maricopa County officials to admit that while they had a count on all mail-in ballots at the processing centers, they did not have an official count from the original locations where the ballots were dropped off as required by Arizona law. So the problem there is that between transporting ballots from location A where they were originally dropped off to location B where they were counted, there is actually no chain of custody record. We have no objective basis to know that the amount of ballots at location A were the exact same amount of ballots at location B, and that by definition renders the ballots invalid, not because they were tampered with, but because they could have been. And again, the lawyer Robert Barnes tweeted this standard out the other day, quote, "Arizona law is clear. Even inadvertent errors in election require setting aside result if it casts outcome in doubt. Intentionality is not required when the error casts actual winner in doubt. So under Arizona law, Kari Lake is not required to show that anyone intended for these errors to happen. All you have to do is show is that such errors like the printing size discrepancies and the breaks in chain of custody happened, and it happened to enough ballots to throw the results of the election in doubt, and that's all that needs to be shown, and that is what was shown. And yet, because we now officially live in a cartel-alized system that's corrupt through and through, where every branch in government from Dunn C. Deuce's governorship in Arizona to the Reiner Republican legislature there now to the court systems, they've all become instruments of protecting the permanent political class, but Kari isn't having it. Texas Republican Jonathan Strickland, I think, said it best about Kari Lake. The establishment mistakenly thinks they've delivered a death blow to Kari Lake. Little do they know they've created a powerhouse who will lead a movement in Arizona that ensures their demise. Mrs. Lake doesn't know how to give up. #onward. That's right, onward and upward. She goes, you won't believe what she just said, you're going to absolutely love it. She is doubling down like never before. On Christmas Day, Kari Lake's legal team tweeted out this gem quote, "It's a fair bet some officials in Maricopa County got coal in their stockings this year. We've heard those pair nicely with perjury charges." Well. What the Kari Lake team appears to be getting out there is the apparent discrepant testimony by Maricopa County Election Director Scott Jarrett. On the first day of the trial, he denied that there were 19-inch ballot images printed on 20-inch paper, which appears to have been the source for the mass breakdown in getting the votes counted by machine tabulators on Election Day. However, after Kari Lake's team proved that that's exactly what happened. On the second day of the trial, he admitted that he knew about the size discrepancy between the ballot image and the paper. On the second day of the trial, he admitted that he knew about it, indeed a few days after the election, and yet, these guys went ahead and certified it. They knew there were all these election problems, but they went ahead and certified the election anyway. Anyway, I wonder why. So you got some discrepant testimony there, and that's where I think she's going. Kari Lake is going. Katie Hobbs, of course, is doing her best to exploit the game system to our advantage, threatening Kari Lake. But that's only strengthening Kari Lake's populist bona fides and only guaranteeing a mass recall effort that will play Katie Hobbs' first months in office. In the meantime, it is, as I've noted, increasingly clear that we are living in the midst of a cartel-alized system run by a professional political and business class that care nothing whatsoever about anything apart from their own interests and their own concerns. Now the technical term for this is what's called RePF utilization. That's a term coined by Professor Joel Kotkin of Chapman University in California. And it refers to the various ways in which the structure of our globalist society is increasingly reflecting the kind of social structure that characterized the feudal Middle Ages. So for example, today, like then, you have an astonishing concentration of wealth and power, where very few people control pretty much everything. So 5 years ago, about 400 billionaires own half of the world's assets. Today, it's just 100 billionaires. And by the way, China is basically the same. China, ironically, is now more unequal than the United States. So you have a tremendous concentration of wealth and power. Like we saw with Sam Bankman-Fried, who, by the way, how's he doing today? We'll compare how he's doing to those involved in JSX. And you can see for yourself how this refeudalization plays out in real time. He's part of the class of lords who operate according to their own rules and values. So you have this tremendous concentration of wealth and power. And secondly, we're seeing today a comparable kind of religious fundamentalism, as it were. But of course, the fundamentalism today isn't, the Roman Catholic Church. Today, it's all things woke: environment, gender, race. But the key here is that, like with the religious fundamentalism of the Middle Ages, there's no room for dissent. Dissenters are heretics, and instead of a clerical class enforcing the new dogma, it's a clerici class. A class is pseudo-intellectuals from the universities and the professions, the credentialed class. And what we're seeing here is how big business and big government, billionaires and bureaucrats, are teaming up together to create a singular system under which we all have to live whether we want to or not. And we're finding that system, we're finding out through the Twitter files, or we're finding out through American COPPA, county corruption, we're finding that system is doing everything it possibly can to crush the democratically expressed will of tens of millions of people. And that's exactly the conclusion of this. Professor Kotkin, he fully recognizes that refeudalization is indeed destroying the very fabric of democratic integrity. Our elections, as we're finding out more and more, are increasingly staged events where very powerful special interests have guaranteed the outcome, and the corrupt legacy media provides bought and paid for cover of this rampant corruption. Now the good news is that this is not hiding anymore. This festering filth is losing the darkness of its cover with more and more light exposing it. Corruption corrupts, and like we saw historically with the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union, the masses will eventually bring this corruption down. And Kari Lake will most certainly be there to celebrate. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. If you're up for it, I'm gonna get back to work. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.